Welcome back everyone. Hi, if you're new, I'm Tori, and today we're going to get into some of my recent reads, and some of them unfortunately were a little disappointing, and it was just kind of unexpected because these were some of my most anticipated releases for 2024, and I really thought I was going to love them, but it just didn't turn out that way. But it's not all terrible because I did also read an upcoming release that's coming out, I believe in June, sometime like early June, that I want to chat about with you guys. That was really good. And then at the end of the video, we're going to get into two books that are just incredible. I hope you guys have been doing well. I hope you've been reading some good books recently, and I hope you enjoy this video. So let's get into it. So I'm gonna structure this video going from my least favorite reads to my favorites, and sadly we have to kick the video off with Ghost Station by S.A. Barnes. This one, I'm not gonna lie, this one kind of hurts. This was one of my most anticipated releases for 2024. I was so excited. You guys know that I really love Dead Silence by this author. I know the ending of Dead Silence loses a lot of people, but I was on board. I still had such a great time, and it's always just such a fun recommendation to give. So just imagine my disappointment when I finished this book. I don't even know what happened. It's so dry. It wasn't as exciting as I thought it was gonna be. It was atmospheric for sure, but it definitely didn't have that level of just tension and thriller horror elements that I was looking forward to in the story. The main character, I didn't find her to be terribly interesting after a while. I thought the narrative started to drag a lot when we got into the middle of this book. There is a massive spoiler in the synopsis, something that doesn't even happen until the second half of the book. And I'm just like, what is going on here? We have our main character in this, Dr. Ophelia Bray. She's a mental health professional, and she's dedicated her entire career to studying this like space illness, and something horrific happened in her past that she's still grappling with it as an adult, still hasn't been able to come to terms with it. And in the process of her profession as an adult, she tries to do little things to make amends and just try to get over this crippling trauma that she still has from childhood. And so she gets put on a crew that don't want her around. The crew recently lost one of their members. They go to this abandoned station on this abandoned planet, and Bray's role just over the course of the entire story is just really passive. She is not like really an active member of the team because of her profession. She's just kind of there to like observe them, listen to them. And so she's not doing a whole lot. And just because of that, and because of the things that she's still going through in her past, we just get a lot of her like repetitive inner thoughts over the course of this story. I think a lot of the tension that is built up at this abandoned station, so much of it is lost because of the things that Ophelia is thinking about over the course of the book. I'm very disappointed, as you could tell. I thought I was gonna love this. I will continue to recommend Dead Silence though, but Ghost Station unfortunately was a miss for me. So now let's get into The Familiar by Leigh Bardugo. This is Leigh Bardugo's most recent release. It came out in early April. I was so excited for this. I had the release date marked on my calendar, like my phone calendar, the physical calendar. I was ready for this book. And it's the kind of book that I finished and I was just like, yeah, it was a book. I finished The Familiar and just had no like real like exciting thoughts. Leigh Bardugo, she is a good writer. She can tell a good story. I always trust Leigh Bardugo to get me from point A to point B. Like everything about this is all good, but nothing really ever had me saying, oh my God, this is amazing. I love this so much. And then on the flip side, nothing was ever to the point where I was like, oh, I'm gonna DNF this. This is so terrible. Reading this book just feels like just one kind of flatline reading experience. It's just like all good. Maybe there's like a little interest right here, and then it's just all fine. This is historical fantasy, heavy emphasis on the historical. Magic is a really small part of this. Our main character, Lucia, is a maid, and she is able to perform magic, but the magic in this is pretty small. It's just kind of like woven into the fabric of our main character, Lucia's life. Like say she is supposed to go to the market and get like 12 eggs or something, but she only manages to get 6. On the way back to where she works, she can just, kind of stick her hand in the basket, do a little magic, and then there's 12 eggs. So it's really small things like that that she does to just make her work a little more bearable living in this house. Like if bread comes out burnt, she can unburn, is that a word? Unburn the bread. You get what I mean. But then pretty quickly, the woman that Lucia works for discovers that she can do these small acts of magic, and she wants to take advantage of this in order to you basically up her standing in society and up the standing of her house. One thing leads to another. Lucia catches the eye of someone who works for the King of Spain, and it just all goes downhill from there. And again, the book just never really reached a high for me. It was just all very fine. I do love the way it was written. I think the prose flows really well in this. There is a small romantic subplot that we get, but yeah, this is just not going to be a read, I think, that sticks with me until the end of the year. Actually, I wasn't even thinking about it until I sat down to film this video, so that should tell you something. So overall, this was good, not great, not terrible. Would I recommend it? Maybe. Next, I finished The Lies of the Ajungo by Moses Osei-Utomi, and I really enjoyed this. This is a novella. It's only about like 85, 90 pages or so, and the author does manage to do a really good job cramming in a lot of this story into such a small space. Just the setup for this world, I think, was really fascinating. This is like African inspired fable almost, and just even the way it reads, it kind of has like almost like a dark fairy tale kind of tone to it. In this, we have the Ajungo Empire, and long ago they stumbled across our main character Tutu's village. The Ajungo Empire made a deal with the leader of Tutu's village. In exchange for water that the Ajungo Empire can give them, they have to cut out the tongues of all the people in the village who are about to turn like 13 years old. And this has all been going on for such a long time, and the Ajungo only give them like barely enough water just to survive, to keep them cooperating essentially. But where we start to really get into the story is in this village, right before you're about to turn 13, you can go off into the world and search for a source of water so that the people of Tutu's village can live freely. They won't be under the Ajungo's empire's power anymore. This is exactly what happens with our main character Tutu. He is 12, almost 13, and he sets off into the world in search of water. And I found the prose in this to be so fascinating. Again, it does kind of read like a fairy tale, and I really loved how Moses Osei-Utomi gets into just the nature of water. Like Tutu has never seen a large body of water before, so what is that even going to look like to him? It's so fascinating. And along the way, he's also trying to avoid dangers of the desert. He comes across a variety of characters. So yeah, it's a really interesting African fable, almost like Odyssey type of story that I really enjoyed. I do think I am going to read the next novella. It takes place long after the events of The Lies of the Ajungo. So if you did just want to read this first one, it is a contained story. You'll get a beginning, middle, and end in a really short space. So yeah, I enjoyed this. I do recommend it, and I can't wait to read more from this author. Next, let's get into the Silverblood Promise by James Logan. This is the first book in a new fantasy series from Tor. This is called The Last Legacy series. I really enjoyed this overall. This is just a mix of a lot of stuff. It's very adventurous. Our main character, Lucan, definitely has his charming moments, but kind of mixed into all of that are just these random like moments of violence that remind you that this is a dark world and this is a dark story. The back of the book says this is great for fans of Scott Lynch, Nicholas Eames, and Joe Abercrombie. I think heavy on fans of Scott Lynch and the Gentleman Bastard series. I think more than anything, that's what this reminds me of, especially the city in this, Safrona. I really enjoyed as a setting, and I think you can tell that James Logan is trying to treat the setting as a character, a lot like in the way we see Kamor as a character in the Gentleman Bastard series. Not quite to that extent in Silverblood Promise, but the city definitely has a lot of character and personality, which I really enjoyed over the course of this book. So our main character in this is this young man named Lucan, and he comes from a noble family, and he was away at the academy. Something tragic happened during a duel, and he was expelled. And from there, he was also estranged from his father. Fast forward, we come into the story. You find out that Lucan's father has been murdered, and the woman that's worked for Lucan's father and just the family in general for many years gives Lucan a clue from his father to set off into the world, go to Safrona, and basically start unraveling what exactly happened to him. So Lucan sets off to this new place. He has no idea what he's doing, very little to go off of. He just really wants to get there, figure out what happened to his father, and get out, but he just gets wrapped up in so much just mess and drama that is happening in the city of Safrona. A lot of ways it feels like this really epic quest. You think the journey is so straightforward, but Lucan will only get so far, and then he kind of takes a little detour, has to come back, takes another, and it just becomes so messy after a while, like in a good way. Yeah, I had a really fun time with this. I do recommend this. I will say my biggest issue with this book is Lucan himself. By the middle of this book, I was so tired of his inner thoughts. There are a lot of them. He interrupts the narrative all the time with just so many random thoughts. And I'm like, some of them, first of all, aren't even relevant. Some were already revealed in the prose, and I'm like, I don't need you to keep repeating that. And then other times it is just so unnecessary. Like, he'll be in a life or death situation, something very serious is happening, and he'll be looking at some like woman, and he'll be like, she looks really good in that uniform. And you're just like, Lucan, we gotta focus. What is going on? And that's just like one example that happens more than once of him just thinking the most random things at the most random times. His thoughts are just all over the place. It definitely began to annoy me after a while, and unfortunately it just doesn't let up. You get a feel for it within the first like 60 pages or so, and however you feel about that within the first 60 pages is gonna be how you feel about it throughout the rest of the book. It just keeps going. But yeah, he gets himself into some really sticky situations. I really enjoyed Lucan's companion in this. I can't wait for you guys to see who that is. It's just, that was a really fun dynamic that I think worked really well. I'll definitely be reading the next book, but I do hope Lucan's inner thoughts are just turned down, turned off, something. Now let's get into a book I finished weeks ago, and I am still just really back and forth, really conflicted about a lot of things in this book and just in this trilogy as a whole now, and that is Shorefall by Robert Jackson Bennett. And this is the second book in the Founders trilogy, book 1 being Foundry Side, and the third book is Lachlan's. And this, I don't know where to start with this. This, I think, has really changed my perspective on the Founders trilogy. I came out of Foundry Side really enjoying it. I thought the magic system was incredible. Really loved Sanchia as a main character, and I was excited to go into this second book because I wanted to get more of those secondary characters and just see how they would grow, see how Sanchia's dynamic with them would change in the second book. And I'm really happy to say that that was one of the standouts of the second book. I really got attached to these secondary characters, Sanchia's little crew. I really loved them by the end of the second book. But that being said, the magic in this book, just this series as a whole, and where, like, how this plot started evolving in the second book just became not as interesting to me after a while, which was kind of a surprise. I just was fully expecting to love this trilogy by the time I finished with it. But now I'm in a place with this series where no matter what happens in book 3, it is not going to change how I feel about this trilogy as a whole for the better. It could impact my feelings more negatively, but there's nothing that could happen in book 3 where I'm just like, oh, the Founders trilogy is so amazing, which is kind of upsetting because I was really all about it. I was like, book 2 is going to be so much better than book 1, and like, I'm just going to love this series, and I'm not there. I'm not there. I think with Shorefall, there are some things that happen in this book, and just the way that the story and the magic and just the concepts, the philosophies, everything, that just, it's a way that it keeps evolving in this book that is not fun anymore for me. It's like something new and big will get established, and it's like, oh, okay, that's interesting how that just expanded. I didn't know we could do that. Okay, I'm here for it. And then something else like big will top it, and it's like, okay, well, I guess I'm along for the ride for this now too. And then something else just big and wild and insane will happen, and you're like, what is going on in this series? It's like you don't really get a chance to appreciate how things are evolving because the next thing is just so much bigger than the first, and then the third thing is so much bigger than the second, and you're like, oh my God. It got to a point where I was feeling like this book was just getting a little bit too smart for its own good in a way that I just didn't find to be captivating anymore. And I began reading it like, oh, of course that just happened, or like, oh, of course that just got even weirder. So kind of having more like apathetic feelings to it than I was hoping for. So I'm gonna read book 3, but I do think this series is starting to like just get away from me in a way that I understand what's going on. It's not, once you read it, it's not like rocket science. I understand what's going on, but it's not fun anymore. It's just like, oh, okay, here we go. I'll read Lachlan's just to wrap things up, but I'm not as enthusiastic to go into Lachlan's as I was coming into Shorefall off of Foundry Sides. Now let's talk about the Stardust Grail by Yume Kitase. This is a sci-fi novel that's coming out in June. Thank you so much to Flatiron for an early physical copy of this. I had such a fun time with this. This is like Tomb Raider, Uncharted, Indiana Jones in space. If you just want like a really fun, just adventurous kind of space romp, this was definitely the one to check out. And I actually liked this more than the author's debut novel, The Deep Sky. I do think the character work in this one wasn't as good as what we got in The Deep Sky, but just in terms of the story itself, I enjoyed this a lot more than The Deep Sky. In this, we have our main character, Maya. She's a retired art thief, which I already thought was just really cool when I first read the synopsis. She's just lived this wild life around the stars, and now she's on Earth trying to get her PhD and just lay low. But she gets reluctantly pulled back into a final job where she has to find this relic known as the Grail, and the relic is a special interest for these different groups. One group wants it because of its the potential that it has for humanity and the universe, but the species that the Grail rightfully belongs to have also been looking for it, and this could save them from extinction. And Maya is just kind of caught up in the middle of this. And this book moves pretty quickly, which I do think is a positive and negative for it. There are some scenes that we just kind of blow by, and it's almost a little jarring because you're like, wait, we were just here and like now what's going on? I think sometimes dialogue, the way that it bounces back and forth, moves a little too quickly. And even in terms of the way that it's written, there are some things that I think are over-explained that don't need to be explained, and then things that need a little bit more clarification we just kind of breeze past. I think the balance between those could have been a little bit smoother in this book, but overall I had a fun time with this. If this sounds interesting, definitely put it on your TBR. And then last but not least, let's talk about the 2 books that have officially gotten me out of my like YouTube filming funk or whatever this has been. I could not process these 2 books alone. I had to turn on a camera. These 2 books are incredible. We have The Will of the Many by James Islington and Empire of Silence by Christopher Rocchio. These 2 are going to be getting their own separate videos because there is just too much to say. There's too much I want to talk about, and it's not enough time in this video. And I just really want to use this as a time to ramble, if that's okay. Let's actually start with The Will of the Many first. Where do we start with The Will of the Many? This is so good. Before I finished The Will of the Many, the last book that I would consider like a favorite for 2024 was The Trials of Empire, and that was at the beginning of 2024. And nothing has come along until I finished The Will of the Many about a week or so ago. This was incredible, like truly incredible in every way, shape, and form. I love this. I had such an incredible time reading this book. I loved following this. I think he is an amazing main character, and just everything that happens in this book, the way that it's structured, the way that this interacts with different characters, the dynamics between all of them. It is so good, and this is so smart and so sharp. I really love this. I went into this book really knowing next to nothing. I knew that this was the main character, that he was going to go to this academy, but everything else was just a little bit hazy in terms of details of what I knew about this book beforehand. Just the way that the society is structured, the way that Will even works in this book, I think is just part of the excitement of experiencing it for the first time. Oh my God. Next we have the Republic, the Canon Republic. I did not pronounce that correctly at all. There are pronunciations at the back of the book. I forgot. So we have this Republic. They have conquered all of these different places, and our main character, Vis, comes from a place that was one of the last places to be incorporated into the Empire. I am not going to say any more than that. And he obviously has a lot of resentment toward the Republic because of that and their hierarchy, kind of societal structure. And so after, you know, struggling to survive on the streets and doing what he can, Vis gets an opportunity to study at the most prestigious academy in the Republic. And he's sent there for a reason. There's some strings attached. And it is just so good watching Vis try to maneuver through these different power structures. I'm telling you, like, the way that Vis can think on his feet, he's better than me. If one person would have asked me a question and I just would have folded. I would have forgotten all the lies I had told and just completely outed myself. And I can see how, you know, the things that this goes through and the scrapes that he gets out of could be a little too convenient at times. He reminds me a lot of Daryl from Red Rising in that way, and just even in terms of the society and like its Roman influences, reminds me a lot of Red Rising. But unlike Daryl, and the fact that this book is just its own thing anyway, I feel like it makes a good name for itself. Just even aside from all of that, Vis has a reason why he's good at all of these things. So it's a little bit different from Daryl, who's just like kind of getting out of things because he's the main character. I don't know why I slept on this book for so long. I really, really don't. The ending is probably one of the most unhinged things I've read in a long time, to the point where I actually had to go back and reread the last couple of pages a few times because I was like, what is going on right now? There is no way. How did this just happen? I tabbed this up so much. I went back, was flipping through different scenes that we got, then I read the ending again. Oh my God, you guys, I just had to get back on YouTube and ramble about this book. It is truly, I think this might be one of the best books I've read so far in 2024. I would actually surprisingly put it above The Trials of Empire. I loved it that much. I desperately need book 2, and I think it's a crime that it's not coming out to 2025. This was amazing. I think even the way that James Islington handles the world building in this book is so good. It's natural. It flows into the course of the story to the point where I still even had questions at the end of the book about just certain facets of the hierarchy and how things really worked that I'm excited to dive more into in book 2. I think they were good questions to have, not like, how did you just end the book and didn't answer any of this stuff? that's all I have to say. We're done with that ramble. I will have a separate video up for the Will of the Mini sometime this week. That's a little more structured in my thoughts, but I really just needed to just chat about it. It's so good. And then last but certainly not least, I am so excited to talk about this book with you guys. And this is another one that is gonna need its own video, maybe two. I have never been this excited coming off of a first book in a series since I read The Grace of Kings. It's Empire of Silence by Christopher Rocchio. This is book 1 in the Sun Eater series, which I'm sure you guys have been seeing all across BookTube now. And now that I have finally finished this first book, I can say that it is some well-deserved attention. This was incredible. This was incredible. I used all my tabs for this book. Where do we even start with Empire of Silence? Let me just rewind a little bit, because I actually picked this book up at the very beginning of 2023. I think it was like February 2023. And I was like, I'm gonna read the Sun Eater series. And I probably got like 150, 200 pages into Empire of Silence over the course of 2023. Just kept picking it up, putting it down, not making any real progress in it. And last week I had some time off work and I was like, you know what, I'm gonna start this book fresh. I'm gonna go back to the very beginning. And by the time I finished it, I was basically kicking myself that I had picked this book up and put it down for so long and just left it unread. This gets so much comparison. It's even on the back of this book to Red Rising. It says on the back that this book is perfect for fans of Pierce Brown and Patrick Rothfuss. And it could not be more different from those two series. Yes, I can definitely see how if you're a fan of Red Rising, which I am, I love, that's my favorite series. I can definitely see how if you love that, there is definitely a lot to love here. But the Name of the Wind comparison, you guys know I do not like The Name of the Wind. I have mentioned that a few times over the course of this channel. It is just, I think The Name of the Wind is honestly very boring. This only gets the comparison to The Name of the Wind because it is our main character, Hadrian, telling the story in his own words. If you like that kind of story structure, that framing narrative, okay, fine, I can see that. But just story-wise, no. We have main character in the story, Hadrian Marlowe, and he tells you in the first paragraph of the first page of this book that he destroyed a sun and killed billions of people. But in doing so, he also ended the war against this alien species known as the Cielsen. And the Cielsen have been the biggest threat that they have ever seen. And Hadrian is somewhere in the future looking back on all of these events, telling the story in his own words of how he became this legendary, infamous, revered, feared like figure. And it is just, it's something else. I genuinely don't even know what angle to come at this from yet, because I just needed to turn on the camera and just start talking. The scope of this world building is on a different level. Let's start there. The world building is on a different level, but the prose and even just the tone of this and how Hadrian relays his story in a lot of parts with just so much vulnerability, and it's so good. Even the level of character growth and development that we get in this first book alone is just incredible. Hadrian is such a dynamic character. He comes from a noble house, has really a terrible father. You can tell he just has a different level of compassion and appreciation for people, unlike his brother does. He has a talent and love for languages, and you just get some really interesting and complex dynamics, not only from Hadrian himself, but just from the cast of characters over the course of the story. Even though I love this, my biggest issue is the pacing. Like any character that is telling stories in their own words, I think they tend to get very long-winded. We've seen it with Fitz, we've seen it with Quoth, even Gabriel in Empire of the Vampire and the Damned. They just have a tendency to go on and on and on and on, and Hadrian, unfortunately, is no exception. But the pacing just doesn't even compare to the rest of my reading experience. And I feel like I was just in the right place, right time, just really craving a kind of epic science fiction story, because I've been reading so much high epic fantasy. And because I'm me, I have the other books here, except Disquiet Gods. I have them all ready to go. I'll get to the novellas too, but this is all very exciting, you guys. I will again do a full video for Empire of Silence, but I needed to sit down and just ramble to you all, because that was something. So that is it for me, you guys. Thank you all so much for watching this video. I really appreciate it. Let me know down in the comments what you've been reading lately, if you've read any of these books, and I will see you guys in the next video. Take care.